Welcome everybody. Today's topic is how to get over public speaking as a hospital administrator. My name is Jeff Comer and I've been a hospital CEO for over 20 years. And I'm also educated at the doctoral level in psychology with research focused on stress management and mitigating stress. So today we're going to spend some time going over public speaking from a little bit different aspect. There are lots of articles, websites, books on the specific tactics of public speaking, how to organize a speech, how to deliver it, how to rehearse it, how to target your speech per your audience requirements, all these different things that are very important. But where I'm coming today is more of a psychological perspective. How can you understand why we as humans have a natural fear of public speaking, and more importantly, what are some psychological tactics you can use to maybe not eliminate that fear, but make it a lot more comfortable. So that's our goal today. Interesting, and you may have heard this before, but people are more afraid of public speaking than death. People would rather die than get in front of an audience and speak. Now, as a psychologist, I could have a field day with that. I mean, we could talk about that in and of itself for hours, but it's very interesting that people have such a profound fear of public speaking. And as hospital administrators, you got to speak. You cannot get around it. Now, most people think of public speaking as this big, huge auditorium with 1,000 people looking at you, a big elevated stage, a podium, a lectern. You've got a big screen behind you with a video of you talking. All these different, huge things taking place. But what I would tell you is, yes, that is certainly one aspect of public speaking, but it's much more broad than that. Public speaking can be talking to one person in your office when you're presenting a new idea. So for example, maybe your board chair is there and you're talking about expense reductions or a new plan for a new service line. Maybe you're the director of housekeeping and you're meeting with your vice president to talk about the need for additional FTEs to clean more effectively. You're always public speaking in these roles. It doesn't have to be that big, huge auditorium. So sometimes just thinking about that can actually be a little bit comforting. There's really no difference between speaking to one person and 1,000. Some people, myself included, are actually more comfortable in front of a large audience than a small audience. And there's some psychological reasons for that. We'll touch a little bit on those. But just think to yourself, how do you define public speaking? What does it mean to you? So just take a second to kind of think through that a little bit. So let's come back to why public speaking can be stressful. And it is for some people and it's not for others. For myself, I will admit, I used to be terrified of public speaking. I remember back in graduate school, the first day of class, the professor would walk in, they'd give you that syllabus for the whole semester, and I would immediately look to the end of the semester to see, is there a speech that we have to give? And a lot of times there was. And immediately I would get nervous. I would already start dreading it, even though it was like 4 months away. I would have a lot of anxiety over that speech at the end of the semester. And then the day of the speech, after the whole semester to prepare for it and get ready, I would walk in the room, my heart would be pounding, my muscles would be tense, I would be sweating, my stomach would be in knots. And actually, I even remember one particular class, I got there early, and because I was worried about sweating, so I turned the thermostat down. My classmates are listening to this, you'll remember this. But I turned the thermostat down like really cold, and something happened. The thermostat actually broke, and we couldn't reset it. So it was like 50 degrees in there, and everybody was freezing and shivering. Of course, I was up there speaking, still sweating away. But again, I want you to know that this is very common fear. I have it, I've always had it, but I've actually come to where I really enjoy public speaking, and I mean that sincerely. I've worked a lot at it, I've studied it, I've researched it, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you will become with it. But you also need to understand, why do humans actually have this fear? So I mentioned the stress reactive component. In other videos, you've heard me talk about stress reactivity and what it is, so I'm not going to belabor it, but just briefly, that is your stress response system that does all those things I said a second ago. Your heart rate increases, your respiration increases, body temperature increases, causing you to sweat. The butterflies in your stomach is because your digestive system has actually basically stopped working, and it is now pumping fatty acids and glucose into your muscles to prime them. So when you hear about stress reactivity, it is definitely something that over time can cause detrimental, chronic, negative effects on your health. But in the short term, you can actually use it positively. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So again, keep in mind that it is very natural to have this stress reaction feeling. And it was originally intended to protect us. It saved us as a species because that bear that was chasing you, or the predatory tribe, stress reaction made you react and move and really save yourself for someone that wanted to kill you. Now, public speaking is not going to kill you, at least not the audiences that most of us speak at. Maybe your audiences are a little tougher than mine, but you're probably not going to die from public speaking. But what's interesting is your body doesn't know that. Your body still interprets this stressor that your mind has processed as a stressor, and it engages this stress reactivity process. So just keep that as a little bit of comfort. I know it's ironic for me to say it's comforting to think about stress reactivity, but it's a normal physiological process that you are programmed from an evolutionary psychological perspective to have. It's nothing you've done wrong. You're not a weak person. You're not a bad speaker. You just have some nervousness that has evolved over time, and it's now somewhat misdirected and maladaptive. So we'll work on how we can make it more directive and more adaptive. The second component that I want to talk about from, again, an evolutionary psychological concept, and this concept really drives a lot of human behavioral patterns, norms, as well as our variations, but that involves clan acceptance. Again, so much of psychology is driven by the evolutionary aspect. Our minds have not really caught up to the civilization and the progress we've made. So our minds still at an unconscious level react the way we did tens of thousands of years ago. So we used to have to be a part of a clan. Without a clan, human beings could not survive. You would die if you were rejected or removed from your clan. So from the context of public speaking, when you're in front of an audience, whether that's 1 or 100 or 1,000, from a psychological concept, even at an unconscious level, you do seek approval and acceptance from your audience, from your clan that you're speaking to. Is a biologically, psychologically driven process. We all want to be liked. We want to receive positive feedback on our performance. And when you have disapproval or don't perform the way you would like to have, you can take it as a form of rejection. And this rejection invokes this unconscious evolutionary fear, leading to concerns of safety and belonging. This engages stress reactivity and nervousness. And that drives some of your fears of public speaking actually to begin with. So again, just understanding these evolutionary processes can really help you to kind of put the nervousness of a speech in its proper context. You're not being rejected from a clan. You're not going to be killed by a predator. Just understand that and kind of work through it from a psychological perspective can definitely help you. And finally, there's one other aspect that really drives fear in public speaking, again, from a psychological perspective. And that is loneliness. I talked in other videos about how being a hospital administrator is a very, very lonely job. Well, now you're staying in front of a group of people, exposing your thoughts, your ideas, what you think needs to be done. You may be responding to a decision you made that didn't work as well. You're up there all by your lonesome, standing in front of this group that may be hostile, or it may just be a friendly group of people that you're bringing up all these fears from the evolutionary perspective. But regardless, you're up there alone, and it can be very isolating and very lonely. And we are going to talk a little bit about some things you can do to not feel as lonely and engage that audience a little bit more. But just recognize hospital administration is lonely to start with, as a CEO especially, and then now you're up on a stage. It just compounds that loneliness feel, which can also produce stress. So I want to give a little example of that loneliness aspect. I think that's the best way to kind of explain it, because I think it's very important. And I'll share a little bit on my side. I had a very, very difficult turnaround that I had to do a few years back at a little rural hospital. I got there and they were literally within weeks of closing. They are already behind on their vendors. They weren't paying their employees. They had some quality issues. This little hospital was really in a bad spot. So I had weeks to respond to this. Now, with weeks to respond to something like that, you can't grow services, you can't recruit physicians, you can't grow the revenues. You got to focus on the expenses and services that are non-profitable. It's the most horrible part of our jobs. I know many of you have been there. So I did have to enact 35% layoffs in this little hospital, and I closed a lot of service lines, including the OB service line. Now, I did that, as painful and gut-wrenching as it was, I did that to keep the hospital open overall. But in a small, very close-knit community where everybody knows each other, everybody grew up together, they went to school together, they went to church together, this obviously caused a lot of trauma in the community. So there was a community forum that was called, and I had only been on the job for, I think at that point, like a month. and I had to go speak at this forum. There were 900 people. It was this huge stadium-style auditorium. So I'm standing there in front of this auditorium they're like above me, looking down at me, and I had to speak to them on what we were doing. And it was a hostile crowd, understandably so. I mean, we had done some really drastic actions. I had a very hostile media there. And that feeling of isolation, that feeling of fear of rejection, I'd already been rejected, so it wasn't even a fear, it was like a reality. But that fear of isolation and vulnerability was just overwhelming to me. And I walked on the stage with as much confidence as I could portray, and I was nervous beyond belief when I was speaking. And how, though, can you turn a situation like that and recalibrate it, so to speak, to where you aren't quite as nervous, that you can deal with it a little bit more effectively? Because that's what I had to do in that circumstance. So we're now going to turn to that and think a little bit about how we can make public speaking much more comfortable. Again, everything I'm coming at today is from a psychological perspective, not as much of a tactical and speech preparation organization perspective, but evolutionary psychological drives that cause some of these fears. So I want to talk about some of the things that I did to make that particular speech go better for me and also be more effective for the audience. So, and you've heard me talk about this before in other videos. Cognitive reappraisal, very, very important psychological concept, very well researched, very well accepted. It's part of a lot of psychotherapies. It's part of a lot of other treatments for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, other various psychological diseases. But cognitive reappraisal is something that you can use to your advantage, and it is essentially reframing your thoughts, reframing how you label things, how you define things, how you interpret things. And the labels that we put on things really can matter. So when you think about a speech, do you immediately think, oh my gosh, I'm scared to death, I'm nervous, I'm afraid, I might trip over words, they might see my hands shaking, they might see this, they might see that? If that's how you initially organize your thoughts, we need to change that pattern of thinking. It's very powerful and it sounds simplistic. It's not that easy to do, though. It takes some work. But what you need to understand, when you're feeling that nervousness that's inside of you from stress reactivity, physiologically, nervousness and excitement are basically the same thing going on inside you. So your body doesn't really care what you label it. Your mind does, though. So if you've got all this stuff going on inside, the nervous butterflies, the muscles tensed up, the heart rate increasing, respiration increasing, if you simply think about it from the standpoint that physiologically nervousness and excitement are the same thing, start labeling it as excitement. Instead of saying, gosh, I'm so nervous about this speech, start saying, I'm really excited about this speech. They want me to speak on topics that I am knowledgeable about things that I can have an impact on, and they want to hear what I have to say. That brings up a whole different mental model, a different visualization of the outcome that can really change how you feel about it. So really try to slow down, take what you have within your control, which is your ability to choose how you're labeling this event, how you are defining it, and how you're visualizing it, and reframe those thoughts. That is the essence of cognitive reappraisal. And again, it is a very powerful thing that you can use to help you feel a bit more comfortable when you hear that you have to give a speech, and also when you're walking onto the stage to give a speech. So second, you've also heard me talk about this before in other videos, this component of isolation and fear of rejection. Very, very powerful, and it's from a psychological concept. This is, as I mentioned, an unconscious, evolutionary, psychological drive that drives our schema formation, how we categorize things, how we look at the world. And a lot of times it is outside of your direct control. A lot of this is not even within your awareness. It just results in your actions. So what I want to challenge you to do is think, how can I reduce these feelings of isolation, this fear of being rejected, and how can I make this a little bit more adaptive when I am speaking? And that's what I tried to do when I was in that particular situation that I gave the example of. I tried to engage my audience. Engaging your audience will dramatically help you to feel less isolated. You'll feel part of the audience, and they will feel part of your speech. It's kind of a win-win for each of you. So I'm going to give another example on how I made this work, and this was not as dramatic as the previous example, but in one situation I was interim CEO, and I was going to the Chamber of Commerce to speak at their luncheon. We've all done these kind of things before. And so I was standing there, at the podium, and the chamber president was introducing me. And the chamber president was, saying all these great things about my background and my resume and building me up and all this. And I was feeling uncomfortable. I'm more of an introverted kind of person, and I don't really like being in the spotlight that much. And so I was getting a little uncomfortable, a little bit nervous. So he turned the microphone over to me, and I took it. And the first thing that I did, I asked the audience what they think about the hospital. What is their perception of the hospital? Now, I did that very intentionally, okay? I did that for two reasons. The first, I wanted to just have a moment to get the spotlight off of me. We are at our most nervous when we just walk up to start a speech, right? That's typically when you are the most nervous. And once you get going, you realize it's not so bad. You kind of get into your flow, your routine, the nervousness calms down, and you get along with your speech. So the important thing is right when you first get up there, if you're feeling that kind of nervous tension, get the spotlight off of you, engage the audience, and it will be different in different situations. In that particular situation, simply asking them what they thought of the hospital got them talking. So that was the first reason I did that. The second reason I did it gave me great feedback. So as I was tailoring my comments, I could tailor those comments to their feedback. So if they had a lot of positive things to say, I could kind of go along that route. If one of them had a bad experience, I could address that. So it gave me a feedback for what the audience was looking for and what would be valuable to them, which engaged them in my speech. So they were more likely to pay attention to it and to have it resonate with them. And it really, frankly, breaks down that fear of rejection, because now they're a part of it. They see that I'm caring, I'm concerned, I genuinely want to know what they think about the hospital. It's very hard to reject a person or disapprove of them if you know they're genuine and they're sincerely trying. So just that simple technique of engaging your audience, that can dramatically help you to not feel as isolated, to engage your audience, and to reduce those perceived fears you have of being rejected. So think about how you can make that work for you when you speak, regardless of what the setting happens to be. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is a very well-known concept that perhaps you've heard of as well, called primacy and recency. It's something we talk about a lot as psychologists. Basically what that means is, as human beings, we have very short attention spans, okay? We daydream a lot. We go off into our own little, visions and thoughts and memories. And so when you are speaking, most of what you say, people are not listening to, okay? And it's a little bit humbling. It can also be helpful. You can also tell yourself, yeah, I'm speaking, I'm nervous. They're not listening to me anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Maybe that helps you a little bit. But the important point is they do remember the first of what you say and the last of what you say. So the introduction and the conclusion, that is really what people are listening to. And it ties into that previous section on isolation and perceived fear of rejection. If you can engage that audience early on in your introduction, they're going to remember that. They're going to remember what you said, what you're talking about. And then at the end, if you can kind of re-engage them again in another, some way that you find works in that particular setting, that will also help them to remember your message. Again, it makes them feel part of it. It makes them feel you genuinely care. And when people see a genuineness in you as a speaker, they're much more willing to rate you favorably, and they are much more willing to not reject you or disapprove of you, even if you have difficult messages. So in my example at that hospital earlier, it was a hostile crowd, but I did try to engage them in the process. I tried to get them to understand, I'm a person, I have to do this job, and I'm doing this to try to save your hospital so that you and your loved ones can get the care that you need. No, we can't offer all services to everyone. That's not our mission, but we can offer the bulk of the services. That made them feel tied into it, that made them feel a part of it, and that made them realize that I really am trying to do this for the best. And also, I tried to share with them. I said, guys, I've only been here a month. Give me a little bit of a break. I didn't use that phraseology, but try to make yourself a person. So tying all this into the first and the last of your speech can really help you feel more comfortable. It can help the audience feel more comfortable and much more engaged. And then the audience is much more likely to recall your messages that you said throughout your speech. Okay. Finally, everybody right now talks about the mind-body connection. In fact, big part of my dissertation for my doctorate was on the mind-body connection. It is very, very powerful. Your mind, your body, psychologically, physiologically, they are very tied together. They drive each other. The ability of your mind to change physiological conditions and vice versa is a real effect. It is very, very well researched and a very, very powerful tool that you can use. So one thing I always tell people, psychologically, set the tone in your mind with that cognitive reappraisal and portray confidence. When you walk onto that stage, walk out there like you are confident as you really want to be. People really will not see your nervousness. I think a lot of us that fear of public speaking, we have this belief that people are going to see, as I mentioned earlier, your hands shaking. They're going to hear your voice quivering. They're going to see maybe a trickle of sweat, whatever it may be that comes up in your body. I can assure you guys, people don't see or hear any of those things. That is all something you're projecting in your mind, and it's causing more stress in you. Walk out there with your head up, your chest back, your arms at your side. Have a warm, genuine smile, not a fake smile. We all know the difference between a fake and a genuine smile. It is almost impossible, folks, to be psychologically or physiologically stressed, upset, mad, any negative emotion when you have a genuine smile on your face. There is so much psychological research out there that when you smile, you actually, your body, your mind, every aspect of your being starts to feel much better and much more enlightened and lively and peppy and happy. So psychologically, put that confidence out there. Make your body project confidence. Your body will follow the mind and you will feel a lot more confident. I know it seems simple. It's a powerful little trick that you can use that can really help you. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, I'm not talking about specific tactics of public speaking. I am going to do a series of videos on public speaking. It's such a broad topic. It causes so much stress in people. It inhibits a lot of people in their careers, and it does not need to. Everybody who is listening to this, you can become a good speaker. And one thing I do want to mention, there are many people who are just very comfortable in front of other people. We've all seen them. They sit at the front of the room. They like to hear themselves talk. I don't mean that negatively, but they speak up about everything. They give their opinion on everything. And a lot of times those people are not good speakers. It's the person who is more stressed and nervous about speaking who is a better speaker. And why is that? Because stress, we always talk about being this negative thing. You have to eliminate it, reduce it, mitigate it. And I use those words too. But stress can be helpful. Stress can actually be very helpful if you use it and channel it. So if you are stressed about public speaking, you are much more likely to prepare for it. You rehearse, you go over the presentation over and over and over. You watch yourself do it on a video in the mirror. You practice for it. You do your research. You get your information more aligned. You study your audience. The people who are much more confident can just stand up there and wing it, they're typically not as prepared. So just because you're nervous about speaking, again, cognitively appraise that into a positive because you have done more research, you have prepared more, and look at it that way. So again, stress is not always a bad thing. Use it to your advantage, okay? So I hope this has been helpful by using these techniques. I really know that they can make you more comfortable. They have worked wonders for me. I'm here in this with you guys. You're not alone. I am also every day trying to convince myself I'm excited and not nervous and cognitively reappraise what I'm doing. Even before doing this video, I was doing these techniques. They do work, and I hope they help. Please leave me comments, message me. Let me know if there's other videos you'd like to hear that are psychologically oriented towards hospital administrators, and I've got some others that'll be coming out this week. So thanks for spending time with me, and we'll see you again soon.